Bell K is behind the glass, making sure that everything that comes out of our speaker sounds as good as humanly possible. Thank you, Bell K, for doing so. He is capably running the radio show. He's also running the television side of things, as always. He chooses not to participate on the TV side of things in person, but he does make sure that everything is up and running, and he entitles the episode. Today is episode 552 of the Matt Murphy Radio Show, and on the television side, it is entitled...
Matt Murphy wishes you a happy government steals your earnings day. Vegetarian lunch, noon to 3. Let's eat.
There was a long time, Belle, you'll appreciate this. For a long time, every April 15th show, I had a fair tax guy on the show for an hour answering questions about the fair tax. I did it for maybe 15 years. This was I had John Linder on, who assisted Neil Bortz in writing the fair tax book. I had Neil Bortz on one year. I had fair tax representation nationally and state by state. And eventually I stopped. Because the only way that we'll see people continuously misrepresented the fair tax as a flat tax, and it is not.
Yeah.
A flat tax is income-based. A fair tax is consumption-based. They are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. They're not similar to being the same thing. And the fair tax is inherently, in every way, superior to a flat tax. We had a flat tax under Reagan. There was just a two-tier. And it descended into shambles because given enough time, the government's going to reap that money back as best it can. But for years, I had a representative from Fair Tax on to talk about fair tax, to explain its advantages as a consumption tax over an income tax. And I stopped because I felt like it was going nowhere. The K Street lobbyists and the level of power and control that the bureaucracy has governing your income, the amount of control that they have carving out breaks and loopholes within the tax system that exists. Our current tax system is tens, and I'm not exaggerating, tens of thousands of pages long. The reason...
I think isn't it up to about 80,000 at this point?
It would not surprise me.
I may be off on that, but that sounds like something I've seen lately.
Hey, Bell, fact check yourself on that. Fact check Bell on that 80,000. That feels right. It feels good. But even the bureaucracy loves that income-based system because it gives them something to do. The lobbyists particularly love it. What do you got?
The tax code specifically is 6,871 pages, but when you include regulations and guidelines, it goes up to 75,000.
Well, that's where the bureaucracy makes their money. It proves my point.
How the hell is it? Like, I don't understand how Dr. Friday can possibly do her job and understand all of that. And the woman, she's been doing my taxes for years. She's great at it. But I just look at her and go, how do you do your job with all of that?
I don't know. That's the short answer on Dr. Friday is I don't know. I don't know how you would be anyone that understands the full totality of the tax code. But those two figures, 6,871 and that 75,000 figure, proves my point. The 6,871 versus 75,000 demonstrates to you when the bureaucracy gets involved. The 6,871 is a byproduct of the income tax just being ridiculous and the federal government being ridiculous and rules and regulations and heretofores and whereases being ridiculous. Those are the lawyers that work for the lawmakers writing these pieces of legislation in that manner. The other I'll round it up, 70,000. The other 70,000 regulatory pages, that's the swamp. That's the bureaucracy at work with the lobbyists in order to carve out tax breaks from all of the business interests and the other interested parties. That's how they make their money. And the lobbyists do so to the benefit of the groups that they're lobbying for, and they do so by paying off lawmakers. Murphy, how dare you accuse... You're accusing lobbyists of pay? Yes, that's what they do. That's what they're in the business of doing. Understand that. No, they don't cut them a check. No, they don't hand them a sack full of money. They contribute to their political campaigns. And they get others to contribute to their political campaigns. They buy re-elections. Do you understand how much power the people would take back if we passed the fair tax? I understand the fair tax is an easily vilified system, and it takes a bit of explaining, and sadly, it takes a bit of intelligence on the other end of the conversation in order to get it. But it would be the single thing to take away. Let me put it a different way. If we passed the fair tax and repealed the 16th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, that single event would take away more power concentrated in Washington, D.C., and bring it back to the states than anything else we could do in America. And I challenge you to give me an example of how I'm wrong.
I specifically remember, I don't recall her name, but she was running for re-election in Atlanta, and her opponent was for the fair tax. And she specifically made commercials lying, saying that he was trying to pimp a 27% tax increase on everyone.
Right.
When the truth of the matter is that he was trying to use that 27% to be revenue neutral and to get rid of all these other taxes. But that's what politicians do. Oh, he's trying to raise your taxes 27%. No, he wasn't.
They're allowed to lie with impunity. But yes, you're right. I mean, that's the way that it's easily vilified. And sadly, if you get a number of people involved, if you get voters involved that don't do their own homework or research or don't have the personal intelligence to understand this, then they are easily misled on the issue. But the fact of the matter is, if you eliminate income tax, Social Security taxes, all of these other taxes that you have, you eliminate sales tax on secondary purchases. I mean, the benefits, I don't know of anyone that hasn't looked into it that doesn't understand the benefits outside of, they simply just don't believe. The biggest objection to the fair tax that I've spoken to groups about it. I am probably as up on it as, the next guy. I'm a huge supporter of it. And on this tax day, I beg of you to reflect on the amount of money and the amount of work that you put into paying off the federal government, and ask yourself if you're getting that in return. Are you getting that benefit? Are you getting it in return? Look, if you feel like the federal government is bringing it back to you, then you tell me. I just don't believe you're getting a return on an investment with this federal government, especially considering the federal government is $34.5 trillion in debt, and I might need to check the world debt clock because we might be approaching $35 trillion now. But the fair tax, to Bell's point, is designed to be revenue neutral. It's not designed to raise additional revenue for the government, and it's not designed to eliminate revenue from the government. It's designed to act as a better way. It will be a more economically beneficial way. It is a better free market way to run a railroad because you are encouraging growth. By the way, businesses pay no taxes under the fair tax. By the way, businesses don't pay taxes anyway. They embed those taxes in the cost of services. And the idea of embedded taxation is crucial to understanding how it would benefit the end consumer with regard to the fair tax. Secondarily, all of these black market and under the covers and dead of night transactions, all of these under the radar, in the shadows business transactions, those all come out to light with fair tax. The seediest examples, gambling interest, drug money, all of these things that are illegal but generate tremendous amounts of money. We're not promoting those things. We're not saying that we want those things to exist, but they do exist, and they're currently not being taxed, and they would be taxed under the fair tax. I did not mean to get on a fair tax rant, but you get me started.
I'll keep it going. I'm loving it.
You get me started.
$34,656,000,000,000.
Remember like a month and a half ago when it was just rolling over to 34 trillion?
Yeah.
It was, it was like at the beginning of the year.
What are we hitting now? Like a trillion every 100 days?
It's slowed down a little bit post COVID. So it's like I think it's 2 trillion per year. So it's more like, every 150, 160 days.
The second nation behind us is China with 14 trillion, but their GDP is 17 trillion a year, which means their debt is less than their GDP. Ours is 28 trillion a year. So the debt now exceeds the GDP. You could take all the money generated in a single year, just take it from people and apply it to the debt, and we would still have debt.